Welcome back, and coming up in a few moments, we'll be connecting with our good friend Erick Stakelbeck. He's with CBN News, and of course, he's the host of the Watchman, the program that you see right here on the Dove TV network. Yesterday on the Senate floor, Senator Rand Paul gave a little bit of a speech on an amendment that he wanted to be attached to the bill that is trying to deal with the refugees coming into the United States. Now, folks, this thing is it's a worldwide problem. And how do you balance compassion and security? They have clashed. And which way do you go? Which way do you lean? And as from our previous guest to where we are now, there's no question that we are in a crisis in the United States. The level of bureaucracy in this country doesn't allow anything really to be done properly. We don't know how many people are here illegally. We hear numbers anywhere from 11 to 50%. We hear all kinds of things. But we don't know. We don't know how many people's visas have run out. And so I want to hear from Erick, and then we'll hear from Senator Rand Paul. He did go on the floor yesterday and offer an amendment that had some common sense to it. Now, all of this probably will result in a veto at the president's desk. But our good friend Erick, I tell you, this is a man on the run, but for all the right reasons. And it's a delight to have him with us. Hi, Erick. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, Perry. Good to be here. Good to be back.
Thank you. Wow, you're busy. First of all, your thoughts on Paris a week ago.
Well, look, I think number one, Perry, not surprising. Look, number one, a few things here. We've had some 1,500 French leave their comfortable homes in Paris and Marseille, in a beautiful, prosperous country, and travel to Iraq and Syria to join the ISIS caliphate. Now, they're training there, they're fighting, they're chopping heads, and Perry, now they're coming back. The steady trickle is coming back from Iraq and Syria. Europeans from places like France are now returning to their home countries. So, look, we saw it earlier this year in January with the Charlie Hebdo massacre, obviously, in Paris. This, I hate to say, was inevitable. And God forbid, I think we're going to see more of it in European countries for two reasons. Number one, Europe refuses to secure its borders. And number two, we now have the returnees, the battlefield veterans coming back from Iraq and Syria to points all over Europe. And when they come back, Perry, they're not going to get a job at McDonald's. They're going to bring the jihad to European soil.
All right. With the events on Friday night there in Paris, it appears at the moment that the French are waking up. The leadership is pushing back. We're seeing a little bit better response from France than we would see from our own United States. Do you think the policy is going to change? Do you think what happened in Paris is going to have an impact in Europe?
In Europe, I think it very well may, although I will caution, yes, Francois Hollande has done some good things since Friday. You know, France is carrying out major airstrikes in Syria against ISIS right now, Perry, in a place like Raqqa, for instance, which is basically ISIS's capital, the capital of their caliphate. France has carried out some major airstrikes there, which is very encouraging. By the same token, Francois Hollande is also still going to take in, I believe, 30,000 Syrian refugees. So that political correctness, which has such a grip on Europe, and this, in my view, multicultural blindness to the reality of the situation, that stubbornly remains in Europe. But if you see more attacks, I believe any nation, any civilization, any culture, society, Perry, has self-preservation embedded in their DNA. So I believe if these attacks continue and we see an urban warfare, guerrilla warfare type situation on European soil, and that's really what ISIS wants to create, I think if we see that, Europe will respond, at least from a security perspective.
Here in the United States, Erick, it's a different story. Our president, we don't know what the policy is. We don't know what the pushback is. We really don't know anything. And yet the vice president says we're going to maintain our policy. What is it? Do you know?
I don't know. Perry, honestly, I have no clue. As recently as a few months ago, President Obama was saying we don't have a strategy yet. He hasn't articulated any kind of strategy. He assures us that his strategy is working, but Perry, the facts on the ground say otherwise. Number one, the United States, we're supposed to be the leader of the free world, yet we are carrying out limited airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. President Obama refuses to put any type of significant game-changing U.S. ground presence in Iraq. Look, we don't need a major invasion like we did in Iraq before, but we could have U.S. Special Forces leading the way, leading the fight on the ground against ISIS. That would make all the difference in the world. He won't commit to doing that. And basically, ISIS is growing. Look, in the past 2 weeks, Perry, if our strategy is so effective, in the past 2 weeks, let's take a look at it. ISIS downed a Russian airliner over Egypt. They carried out a horrific attack in Beirut, and now they carried out just a world-altering attack, at least a Europe-altering attack, in Paris. This does not strike me as a group that is on the retreat. Now, President Obama says, well, look, we want to contain ISIS. That's not good enough. When a great evil rises, Perry, history teaches us it must be crushed immediately. If it's allowed to grow and metastasize, you have a situation like what Europe did with Adolf Hitler during the 1930s, where they ignored him, they appeased him until they had their backs against the wall and had no choice but to go to war. How much better it would have been for the world and for the Jewish people if Europe would have showed some backbone and acted right away to defeat Hitler during the 30s. Let's hope we can avoid something like that today, but I'm not very encouraged so far as we appease ISIS and the Iranian regime, which is driving towards nuclear weapons.
ISIS pretty much announces what they're going to do in advance, and they've carried it out. We now hear since Friday that New York City's a target. I think there's about 4 states that are on this high watch list. It certainly puts, they win the intimidation war, they win the intimidation war, they win the fear war. And yesterday, Rush Limbaugh says President Obama is now a dangerous man. Would you agree with that?
I think he's been a dangerous man for a long time. I don't think this is a new development, Perry, because his policies are dangerous. Let's just look at his own administration, by the way. Our viewers here in the United States, why should they care about ISIS thousands of miles away, what's going on in the Middle East? We're so distracted here. We live in the most prosperous country in the history of the world. Well, James Comey, the FBI director, a member of President Obama's administration, said recently that there are 900 cases right now active into ISIS-related activity in all 50 states. So what the FBI director is saying, Perry, is that we have a network of ISIS supporters and sympathizers in every state of the union. The barbarians are not just at the gates, they're inside the gates. I'll give you another example. In the House Homeland Security Committee, not far from where I'm sitting right now in Washington, D.C., the House Homeland Security Committee recently released a report saying that 250 U.S. citizens have gone to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS. And dozens have already returned. So if folks think that something like we saw in Paris can never happen here, they are sadly mistaken. Think of 9/11, think of the Boston bombings, think of Fort Hood, etc. But ISIS, its sympathizers, are planning something much bigger for the West. And America is not immune to that.
You know, what do we do, Eric? What do we do? I mean, this is a world crisis. You have heart and head clashing here. You want to be sympathetic to those who are running to be free. You want to be smart about those who are infiltrated into that bunch to come in here to kill us. We don't have a policy, and we're too bureaucratic to make anything work.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about the refugee situation, I think, number one, look, I read today that 72% of the refugees are young Muslim men. Now, no one wants to turn away women and children and orphans. We know that, okay? But if the majority are young Muslim men from Syria, where ISIS lives and breathes, that's probably not a very wise decision to bring them into the United States and Europe right now. For example, 2 of the Paris attackers apparently snuck in among the refugees that were coming to Europe. This is the fear, Perry. We don't have, look, the FBI director, again, James Comey, and our Department of Homeland Security Chief Jay Johnson both said, you know, we can't vet all of these folks. It's going to be difficult to vet all of them. So what you have is, it's not just a trickle. It's in Europe, it's hundreds of thousands of these refugees, not just from Syria, by the way, but from a number of Muslim countries. And here in the U.S., President Obama wants to bring 10,000 in 2016 and 100,000 in 2017. So number one, the sheer volume of refugees coming in makes it difficult to vet them. And number two, remember, Perry, These are folks coming from war zones in a place like Syria. How do you track their track record, their past? Do they even have documentation, identification? They're coming from a war zone. So that's the other thing that makes it difficult with the refugees. So I think, look, in my view, as a Christian, you want to help, you want to love people, but we need to be smart and we need to be shrewd in this situation. I do not believe this is a good time to bring tens of thousands of young Muslim men from jihadi hotbeds into the United States. If ISIS didn't exist, if radical Islam didn't exist, well, number one, we wouldn't have this refugee crisis. But number two, wouldn't be a problem. But the unfortunate fact is radical Islamists can take advantage. There are many, many, I'm sure the majority of the refugees are truly refugees in need, but the chance of it being exploited by ISIS is far too high.
As a person of faith, how are you processing this, and how would you suggest we process this when the bottom line here is we're dealing with an ideology and a faith that wants to kill us and destroy our country? We just don't know how to balance that in our head and in our heart.
Yeah. I think in America we have such a great legacy of obviously religious freedom and religious pluralism, but in many ways Islam is a very, very different kind of system. Look, not all Muslims are terrorists. We know that. It's almost obligatory. To me, it's obvious that not all Muslims are terrorists. We know that. There's good Muslims out there. But we have to acknowledge that there is a growing and significant and very active and vocal slice of the Muslim world, yes, that is radicalized. And yes, that sympathizes with ISIS and seeks our destruction. Now, I believe that this needs to be dealt with. I believe the way to begin is to hit ISIS where they live and breathe in this mini caliphate they've declared in Iraq and Syria. Perry, what I believe we should do is what we did to the German and the Japanese war machines, two other evil empires that sought our destruction, that were godless empires. I believe we should crush ISIS in Iraq and Syria, eliminate them, devastate them. If you do that, you put a dent in their ideology and you demoralize the global movement. I'm not saying radical Islam will go away, but I'll tell you, if you crush ISIS and they go away, that's got to be demoralizing for all these young people around the world who are galvanized, excited about ISIS. Man, that's got to put a dent in how that has to shape their world, right? If ISIS goes down and is crushed and this thing is done, where do they turn then? So I think that's where you start. And again, you don't need a heavy U.S. ground footprint to do that. I think America's got to lead the way. President Obama doesn't want to do that. I'm telling you what we should do. Similar to what we did in Afghanistan, 2001, we had special forces, Delta Force on the ground working with the Northern Alliance. They routed the Taliban. I believe we can do the same thing today, Perry, in Iraq, working with the Kurds, who are very pro-American, who are fierce fighters. But it'd be great in a perfect world, the Arab nations would do it by themselves. But we need to lead the way. It's a sad fact, but we have to do it. No one else is going to do it if we don't step up to the plate at this time in history.
Thank you, my friend. You're a delight. We pray for you. I know that you're on the front line and you live a very dangerous life, but you get the truth out there, and that's what counts. And so thank you, Eric. Keep up the good work. We're honored to carry your program on the Dove TV network.
Thank you, Perry. I'm honored to be on the Dove, and God bless you guys. Always great to see you.
You too. God bless. All right, we'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at thedove.us.